Welcome to the Private Practice Startup, where we inspire you from startup to mastery. We chat with entrepreneurs, experts in the mental health and business arenas, and successful private practitioners to give you the tools needed to make your dream practice a reality. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, and so much more. Here are your hosts, Dr. Kate Campbell and Katie Lemieux. What's up, Startup Nation? We are back again with another amazing episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. I'm here today with my co-host, business partner, friend, all of the above, Katie Lemieux, and I'm Dr. Kate Campbell, and we are excited to interview Justin Gaines. He is a healthcare expert helping therapists get approved for insurance panels. And so he's actually going to be talking about the 3 easy tips for applying to insurance panels. So welcome, Justin.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the intro.
Yeah. So I can predict already that this podcast is going to probably be one of the number 1 downloaded podcasts because we are always getting questions about this. And the fortunate or unfortunate thing for Kate and I is that we have full fee practices and we've created that from the beginning. So we're not always able to answer the insurance questions, hence why we bring in an expert like yourself to do that. So this is going to be awesome and it's going to be super great for our audience. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to providing as much information as I can and answering whatever questions that you both have.
Fantastic.
Yes. So Startup Nation, we love listening to what your needs are, your struggles, what you guys are wanting us to talk about. And this is one of those opportunities for us to answer some of those needs. And before we get started, I just wanted to take a few moments to invite you guys to check out our resources tab on the website, theprivatepracticestartup.com. There you will find a plethora of resources for your private practice growing and building needs. So make sure to check out our A to Z cheat sheet, the essentials for building your private practice, our free HIPAA download, our goals sheet, our brand values assessment, and so much more. Also, if you're not already an exclusive member of our insider Facebook group, the Private Practice Startup, make sure to request to be a part of that group. And we will look forward to seeing you there, along with our community of professionals, experts in the business and mental health arenas, supporting you along your startup journey or your journey in private practice, really from startup to mastery. So let's take a few moments here to introduce Justin and tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does.
Great. So Justin has founded GreenpointMed, and he earned his MBA in finance while studying in Manhattan and became senior project manager. And he's going to tell you a little bit about his journey. So I'm not going to ruin that by sharing all that with you guys. I'll let him share. So, of course, we like to talk about some accolades, accomplishments, and awards. So Justin is professional experience in finance and process management. Like I said, he has an MBA in finance as well as a BS in marketing. He was the captain of his roller hockey team in high school that went undefeated. He loves grilling on the barbecue. I know that Kate has the green egg. Do you have the green egg?
I don't.
Do you know what the green egg is?
I am a big fan of the green egg.
The green egg is epic.
It's the creme de la creme of
it's so good.
Grilling,
it's the slow cooker. It's definitely in demand.
All right, when you get that, and we'll come on over. Just invite us. And Justin also likes to build things, especially for his 16-month-old.
Yes,
that's awesome. What do you usually build?
I just recently built an outdoor little playhouse for him. And there's always little things that come up. So it's like every day there's something new, a new little toy that he gets that I'm putting together.
How fun. Yes, my son's 21 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So they have to come over for a play date sometime.
Yeah. Sounds great.
And grilling.
And grilling, that's right.
There you go.
Without the green egg, though, at least for now.
Well, I've got one in my house. Just saying. Yeah, so what led you into the business you're in now, Justin?
So as Katie mentioned, I was studying in New York up until about 2015. And then I moved down to South Florida. And when I got down here, I was helping out some family members that are or that are healthcare providers. So my mother is a therapist. My uncle is a dentist. And specifically, I was working with my mother on some of the billing issues that she was facing. And she's a Medicare provider. So as I was working with her and trying to help through some of these issues, I got just looked at it and said, this is really tough and really complicated. And I have a background in business, and even I find some of this stuff challenging. So after doing some more research and some more studies, I ended up founding my company, GreenpointMed, last year to really help healthcare providers on the financial side of things when you're running your business. And so my goal and my company's goal is to help healthcare providers be more efficient. And especially when it comes to some of the more tricky issues as it relates to insurance, my company handles those. So this way you can devote more time to your practice and patient care, which is of utmost importance. I think why you're getting into, being a therapist in the first place.
Exactly. It's because therapists want to spend time with people and helping them change. So really outsourcing a lot of stuff. And we talk about that all the time to the experts like yourself, because you do know the ins and the outs, and most therapists don't because they're not experts in credentialing.
I have a few therapist friends of mine who have applied to become Medicare providers or on different insurance panels, and it has taken them such a long time to get finally approved. And they go back and forth and back and forth. And when they're submitting their claims, if there's one little mistake somewhere on the form, or it's not filled out properly, especially for Medicare, it takes them forever to actually get paid for the services. So it's so helpful to have people like you out there who are experts in the process and can really streamline that for therapists. Therapists want to be doing what they love and focusing on their time seeing clients. So that's why it is so helpful to be able to delegate that and really get the help you need.
Yeah. And it's amazing how, like you said, Kate, just one little issue that's wrong on a claim form can take a day to resolve. And I found that the average time that you could spend on the phone with an insurance company is anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. So imagine if you have 2 or 3 of those issues, that could really add up.
And it's less time that you're seeing clients.
Exactly.
Now, I'm aware that therapists have to first apply on the CAQH. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what therapists need to fill out in terms of submitting that application?
Absolutely. So the CAQH stands for the Council for Affordable Quality Healthcare. It's a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2000. And the goal is to try and make healthcare more efficient. And you hear that a lot. Let's make healthcare more efficient because there are so many moving parts to healthcare. And so the CAQH has a few different products. And one of those products is an application that a therapist or a healthcare provider will go on and they will fill out that insurance companies can then access to determine if that healthcare provider should be in network to be able to accept members of that particular insurance company. So some of the information that the CAQH will ask for would be your education. It looks for references, your work history. Also, professional liability insurance is important. Personal information, professional IDs, practice location, all things that they look for. Now, a healthcare provider is required to attest to this information. So it's really important that the information that you're entering is accurate, is current, and is something that you can go back to and change at any time because the insurance companies will be looking at this. And if they find something out of place, it could slow down the process and potentially even derail it.
And that's really your first tip, is really filling out the CAQH profile correctly. And you just kind of listed all those things out. So that's great. And so just to remind you guys, so it's the 3 easy tips for applying to insurance panels. Right. And so if you're finding it hard, just call Justin.
Exactly.
There you go. That's a nice plug.
Easier.
That's tip number 1, the easy tip. Exactly.
Well, I guess we jumped into our topic a little soon, but I did want to ask you, what would you say is the best advice that you've ever received that relates to being in business and being an entrepreneur?
Sure. I've read a lot of books and online articles and, just trying to follow different entrepreneurs. So Mark Cuban is somebody that I really respect and really look up to. And I think the best advice is just to persevere, because when you're starting out a new business, whether it's a practice or just a business or a store, let's say, where you're selling anything, you're going to have lots of ups and downs. And it's being able to manage the downtimes where things aren't going as good. So I like to try and keep everything in balance and equilibrium, because I feel like if you get too high when things are going good and too low when things are going bad, it's really going to have an impact on your flow and your ability to build your business. So I think that just being able to maintain a constant state of equilibrium is probably some of the most important advice that I've received and something that I would give aspiring entrepreneurs.
That's great. There are so many ebbs and flows in private practice in any business, really. So being able to have that balance is key.
And so many that are out of your control too. I mean, there are things that could happen in life that, ultimately you just have no influence over. So you have to be able to manage those and do your best to persevere and just keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Great. We have tip number 1 that we basically just talked about. So what's tip number 2?
So tip number 2 is to be prepared with all documentation that's required by your insurance company or the insurance company that you're applying to. And this is critical because the insurance company, after you submit the application to say that you want to be in network, and if they do accept, then they'll go to your CAQH profile and begin to review that. Now, they may come back to you and say, or your credentialing contact, and say, we need this documentation, right? We want more proof of X, Y, or Z. And it's really important to have that documentation ready so that way you could submit it right away so there are no delays. I think the overall key to really getting into insurance panels is to eliminate the delays as much as possible, because that slows it down. Other people are applying and you don't want to lose your place in line.
And a lot of times the insurance companies get full and stop taking therapists.
That's right. There are plenty of insurance companies right now that if you go to their website, they'll say that they're not accepting certain therapists or certain healthcare providers in specific counties. United Healthcare is a good one where they say that in just down here in South Florida, Broward, Palm Beach, and Dade County, they're not accepting certain type of healthcare providers. So it's important to, not only be up to date on which insurance companies you can apply to because their networks are open, but be in position to respond to any requests or needs that they have as soon as those come through.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Every time I listen about the insurance process, it just sounds so exhausting. And so, if I were going on insurance, I would totally hire an insurance specialist, a credentialing specialist to help me through it, because it's just, there's so much to know. I mean, yeah, you could spend hours researching all these things, but why?
It's a really good point. And, I think that one of the most important things when you're applying to insurance companies and trying to be a network is to be able to establish a process and stick to it. Because if you're able to accomplish A, B, and C first, then when you get to the next phase of it, whether it's the contracting phase or dealing with the particular representative at the insurance company that you're working with, you're able to know that you're on the right path to be able to accomplish and get in network, which is ultimately the goal.
So I just have to say something about being organized. And I know Startup Nation, you're not seeing what I'm seeing, but I think Justin is the first guest. He has this workflow worksheet. His notes are amazing. He obviously really prepared. And so I'm going to assume that you're just really organized and you're very detailed at your job, and you probably deliver and follow up exactly as planned. Cause you're just it's like a beautiful thing here. I'm I don't even know how to do
it's
that.
It's a beautiful downloadable PDF, basically. It's all organized. Yeah. Very pretty as well.
Well, my background is in process management. And so that's very strict as far as making sure that, like I said before, that the first three things are done before you can move on to the next things. And I think that when it comes to insurance companies and applying to be a network, it's so important for that organization, like you said, Katie, because if you don't, you'll really just be totally lost in seeing, hey, who did I hear from? Or do I need to follow up with them? So organization is definitely key.
So I know one question that most people ask, and even I have asked just because I'm curious, is, what are some of the rates that insurers are paying?
Yeah. So insurance companies do not like to publish the rates that they will pay healthcare providers. It's just a secret. It's like a state secret that they don't want to release for whatever reason.
I wonder why.
Now I wonder why. Who knows? But through some research and some diligence and, just kind of prodding, what I found is that where the typical insurance company likes to place their rate is they like to base it off of what the Medicare allowable amount is for particular procedural codes. So your 90837, which is your standard 50 to 60 minute therapy session, let's say, Medicare allows $96 for that session. For a particular healthcare provider. So what insurance companies will do is they'll look at that rate and then they'll make adjustments off of that, either up or down, based on your credentials, based on your certifications, based on a whole range of factors that they review during the credentialing process. So going off of that $96 rate, what I found, what I've been able to see is that Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield tend to have rates that are a little bit closer to that $96. Maybe they fall in the $80 to $95 range, sometimes even going up to $100. And then other insurance companies tend to follow suit. So it really depends on the insurance company. And the more certifications, the more accolades that a therapist would have puts them in greater position to end up getting a higher rate when it comes to the contracting phase.
So there's most likely a difference between a master's level clinician and a doctorate level clinician with the insurance reimbursement.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. And, they look at the entire range of your work history and all the certifications that you have when making that judgment as to what the rates will be.
Yeah. Is there anything that stands out above the rest? Are there certain things that a clinician might have that they would give them a higher rate?
So one of the ways that I like to describe it to my clients is that if an insurance company was looking at 5 licensed mental health counselors, let's say, that were standing in a line, what separates you from the other 4 that are in the same line as you? Do you have certifications? Are you bilingual? Are there other factors that you could put onto the application that will jump out to the insurance company because they want to have the most qualified people as possible to be in their network? So there isn't one specific thing that you could go out and do or go out and get that will guarantee you to be accepted into an insurance panel. It's more of the aggregate of all of your accomplishments that they look at that can help not only get you in network, but also get you a higher rate.
So it's interesting because Kate and I are like branding junkies. Like we love to talk about branding. So when you first said, if you had 5 therapists in a row, what makes you stand out? My thought was like branding. I'm like,
mine too.
But not for insurance companies. It really is based on your experience, your expertise, and those other factors that you have, not what sets you apart in your branding and your niche, right? So it's just interesting how my mind went there. But I think that's important. I don't know. I know a lot of times, like in the therapist group, like I've seen people post, does anyone know a therapist that speaks Mandarin, right? Or some language that's just not really spoken a lot around here. So I would assume that maybe possibly based on your specialties, your credentials and things like that, and maybe that foreign language that you speak might actually help you as a therapist.
Yeah, it absolutely will. And the one thing I will say is that you could have the best accolades in the world and speak 5 languages and be practicing for 15 or 20 years. It still doesn't guarantee that you're going to get accepted into the network. There are factors that are out of your control that ultimately could lead to an insurance panel denying you. So that's just something to make sure that anybody that's going through this process to keep in the back of your mind that there's no guarantee of acceptance.
What is the average length of time that it takes? Of course, it's going to be different for each provider, but I'm just curious, in your experience, what do you find is the average length of time it takes when people are working with you to get approved?
Sure. So I think that if everything is going correctly and you follow up right when you get the request from the insurance companies, you're able to submit documentation, you're able to answer your questions quickly, it could take 3 to 4 months to get accepted to be in network. And that's actually broken up into 2 different sections, if you will. The first part is actually submitting the individual application to the insurance panel saying, hey, I want to be involved in your network. I would like to be considered. If they approve that, then they're going to go to your CAQH profile and start reviewing that. And that's where the bulk of the time really is taken up, because that first initial nod to say, hey, we're interested in you, that could happen within 30 days. But to review the CAQH and go through checking your references, maybe following up on your work history, that could take 60, 90 days, depending on how extensive it is. And that's why it's so important to do tip number 3, and I can segue into tip number 3. Right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay,
you
cool.
can segue however and whenever.
So tip number 3 is to follow up and don't let requests sit around, because that will delay, the amount of time it will take. It will just extend it out and could potentially just have you fall off the radar, which is something you don't want, because you're putting a lot of time and effort, whether you're doing it yourself or you're working with a credentialing company to do this. So it's very important that you follow up on requests that come to you that maybe your credentialing contact's not seeing. If you're working with, submit those to them so that way they could follow up on them. So really 120 days or so is, I'd say a good average, but it's all about that follow-up and making sure that you're staying on top of it.
It almost sounds like purchasing a short sale house. Like the length of time is long and you got to follow up and you got to give this document and then this change and you got to do this and
daunting. It's a daunting task.
Daunting. I'm glad you enjoy it though.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what can therapists expect in working with you and what the credentialing process is like if they choose to work with you?
Sure. So what I like to do is have a conversation with my clients and really understand their approach to treatment. So what type of clients are they looking to treat? And then based upon that, looking at the different insurance companies that are accepting new providers and deciding which would be a good fit. So it may be a United Healthcare. It may be some of the others that are out there. There's Florida Blue if you're in the state of Florida, Aetna, et cetera. So on and so forth. So that's kind of the first step. And then really it's establishing a process that can be followed and adhered to. So you can spend your time with your patients, dealing with your clients on a daily basis. And if those follow-ups are coming, you don't have to deal with that because you can just flip that over to me and I'll follow up with the insurance panel to make sure that those requests are being met.
So important. I actually recently just did a one-on-one coaching session with someone who didn't take insurance. And one of the things she said to me, she said, well, I don't even know if I'm charging my clients. And I was like, do you take insurance? Like, I was thinking like, maybe she messed up and didn't do her paper. She's like, no, I don't take insurance. And she's like, just sometime at the end of session, I'm not charging. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what? Like you need to be paid for your time, and systems is really what you're talking about. So having a clear systematic approach to what you're doing is going to result in what it is that you want, regardless. I mean, in any area of business. But especially with this first part of credentialing is so, so important, as well as billing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once you are accepted and you're able to start getting patients that come to see you, the billing part is that's another function that my company does, is handles the billing, making sure that the claims are submitted properly, following up on any issues, and making sure that you're getting paid the maximum amount that you're contracted for.
Mm-hmm. And so aside from the big insurers, like you were mentioning, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, what are some other options available that might not appear so obvious?
Sure. So Medicaid managed care plans are some newer plans that have come over the last few years that have become a little bit more popular. They've taken on a lot of members. And so those are ones that are a little bit easier to get on. They don't pay as much as some of the bigger insurance companies that are out there, but those are other options to look at. So if you've heard of Beacon Health or WellCare or Molina, those are some of the names out there that are big Medicaid managed care providers that could be another option to look at if you're looking to get on a panel that maybe isn't your Blue Cross Blue Shield or your Aetna.
And then I know that people also become EAP providers, but also they usually, I don't know how that process works actually, but is it like they reach out to a company or they're already on an insurance panel?
So they would go to the insurance company, and then the insurance company would contract with them. And then let's say the company, the employer that has that particular insurance plan that they're providing as a benefit to their employees would then be able to use that provider as a contract.
And so that's another way to kind of market. And interestingly enough, I'm actually an EAP provider for the DEA, so the Drug Enforcement Agency, and they had reached out to me. It's not an insurance-based, obviously, it's paid by the government, but there's other things out there that I'm sure that you could do, like Medicaid, Medicare, the insurance panels, different type of EAP, or even contract work. I used to be a contract provider for ChildNet, which is basically DCF down here. So even just kind of expanding the idea of contracting type of work is also helpful for therapists.
Yeah. And you mentioned Medicare, and I would just kind of point out that Medicare does kind of limit in some ways the practitioners that they do allow to be Medicare providers. And so those typically are licensed clinical social workers, clinical psychologists, clinical psychiatrists. That's really kind of the bottom of where Medicare accepts. And if you are a Medicare provider that does accept, you're only allowed to take what the Medicare allowed rate is. I mentioned before, there's that $96 for that typical 60-minute session. So you're only allowed to accept up to that amount.
Good to know. And so one of the curiosities, obviously we're recording this in January, and then it will probably be months later, or you'll be listening to this at any time, and maybe this will be answered already. But what is the impact of Obamacare on the mental health providers accepting insurance? And maybe it will be a null and void issue after our new president comes into office, but what is the impact as it is now?
Well, the one thing that the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare did is that it expanded mental health provisions for insurance companies. So it allowed more people to have access to mental health services. Were there to be a full repeal of Obamacare, then it could be impacted in some ways and scaled back. I think one of the key targets for the Republicans in Congress that want to repeal Obamacare is to limit the Medicaid subsidies that are available. So that's something that we could look at. But just from my perspective, I have a hard time thinking that there's going to be a full-on repeal because nobody wants to leave 20 million people without health insurance. That would be a big, big political risk. And so I think that there's going to be maybe some smaller tweaks that come down the road, but ultimately not a full-on repeal. That would be my best guess, and I guess we'll have to just wait and see as it comes down the road.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Justin, we really appreciate you being here today and really just have enjoyed this conversation, and your tips have been really helpful. And so just to recap, tip number 1 was complete the CAQH profile. Tip number 2, be prepared with all the documentation required. And tip number 3 is follow up and don't let things become stale. And that's where I'm just going to highly recommend get a credentialing specialist, whether it's Justin and we have a few other folks in our community, just get somebody. I just think this is like a very long, lengthy process. And I think you guys might be happier if you just hand it over to someone who's going to take care of you in this process.
Justin, what do you want to make sure that Startup Nation takes away from your message here today?
Well, I think in just speaking to a lot of people, whether they're clients or friends or just people that I've come in contact with, it seems like there's a stigma sometimes when it comes to being an in-network insurance provider, that it's this kind of lofty thing that's unattainable. And I just want people to realize and understand that it's not unattainable. And if done properly and correctly, it can be a really valuable asset as part of your practice. And just listening to your podcast a few times, and you both emphasize branding and marketing so much, this could be another element to branding and marketing your practice that could really help you on your startup journey.
Nice. Yes. I like how you brought everything to that final message for takeaway for Startup Nation. And if you could recommend any sort of resource or great book for our audience, what would that be?
There's a lot of great websites out there that just are constantly publishing articles and content on changes in the healthcare industry. One of my favorite is modernhealthcare.com. I find their articles really fascinating with a lot of good information, and I would recommend checking it out.
Great. We'll make sure to include that link in our show notes page. And we know you have a giveaway for our audience. So what is that?
That's right. So I've developed a cheat sheet for trying to get onto insurance panels. And so if you go to my company's Facebook page, GreenpointMed, just search it on Facebook, you'll find it. And you'll see a post on there talking about this podcast. Just click like or leave a comment or anything like that, send a message, and I'll email you that cheat sheet. So that way you have that. And you can always reach out to me with any questions that you have. I'm happy to answer and provide any insight that I can.
Fantastic. It's great to have a resource like you available for our Startup Nation community. And we'll make sure to include that link in the show notes page as well. Thank you so much for being here with us today in person. It's nice to be able to hear the insurance perspective from someone who is so knowledgeable about the process, because like Katie was saying earlier, we have full fee private practices and we don't have that experience personally and professionally of what it's like to get on insurance panels. So it's great to have that information here today. Startup Nation, we had a great time on today's podcast. We want to encourage you to check out our show notes page for all the tips, resources, and links from today's show. And we thank you for listening. And as you can tell, we're listening to you too. And we really want to make sure we're meeting your needs. So if you have any additional suggestions, struggles, any goals that you're wanting to work on in private practice that we can support you in, let us know. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review, and share our show with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget about the bonuses and resources we offered at the beginning of the podcast. So we hope you have an inspired day, and we look forward to continuing to inspire you along your journey from startup to mastery.
See you later, Startup Nation.
Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.